for oil and gas local content. So I'd like to share with him and for him to give us his insight into how Imo can be a hub, a regional hub for oil and gas logistics and supply business, including local content. Dr. Joko, over to you. Sorry, Dr. Nwapa, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Emeka. Am I on now?
Yes, you're on, please.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present here, and I will stand on existing protocol just to save time, since we've all respected the distinguished participants. So I'll quickly go through a few slides because many of the things we wanted to say in introduction have been covered by the previous speakers. But it's important to note that Nigeria has been affected seriously by COVID. The healthcare people discussed the statistics. Also, the supply chain has been impacted seriously. This is about oil and gas. And the information there is just indicating that the importance of oil and gas to Nigeria. I won't dwell so much on the overview of Imo State. Many of us are familiar with these numbers and they have been covered previously. But let me state that if this was particularly a contemporary discussion on oil and gas, I'll be talking about some of those issues that we always talk about in Imo State, the recovery of Imo oil wells that are not accredited to us, absence of industry presence in Imo State, environmental degradation, ownership of assets by Imo interests, MOUs with operating and service companies, employment of Immigrants in the industry. But I want to actually stay around for today's discussion, leveraging the experience we have in oil and gas industry to stimulate capacity development and access the key sectors of the local economy. Now, we find that what we did in the oil and gas industry regarding in-country value addition can be replicated across the economy. And in fact, we can domicile the same kind of policies and strategies in Imo State to help us. So I'm going to go that discussion and talk about what we can do to use oil and gas as a stepping stone for launching industrialization at the grassroots level of Imo State. And these are the impacts. Again, it's all obvious, the impacts of the COVID-19, so I won't dwell on them again. What I want to say is that even though it's been catastrophic, we, the people of Imo State and Igbo people, we have gone through this type of catastrophe before. We survived the Civil War, and we already have it in our DNA. Our children know the stories of the Civil War. We know that we will not perish because of the pandemic, and that we can all come back up alive again. We have that capacity, we've experienced it before. So we need to face a new reality. We need to, I need to talk about the quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, which says that today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. This applies to what we're trying to do today. So we have to face a new reality and a new approach to development. The global lockdown has demonstrated that we can't escape from ourselves. And so those of us that thought that we can feather nests abroad and set up islands abroad, and so that if there's any such thing that happens in Nigeria, we just run away, have found out that that philosophy cannot stand. So we must come together as Imo sons and daughters to fix our homeland. And that's why it's very important to look at these things beyond just the normal rhetoric of create jobs, create an enabling environment. How do we do that? We need to shift away from burdening the state with excess employees. Our experience is that state governments, federal government, the budget money, let's create 1,000 jobs in every local government in Nigeria. How do you create the jobs? Just budget 60,000 naira, employ people. What are those people going to be doing? What are you creating? Are you just creating a place where people go to collect stipends? So we want to change that to creating a vanguard of employers. People who will now be employing people. And when you create employers, they're more likely to create job opportunities and productive labor force. This is what our brother Ernest has been talking about. When you create employers of labor, like Ernest, Ernest can compete with many governments in the number of jobs that he creates. Then, having created that crop of employers, you also need to recognize the power of the youth as the development drivers. In our country, and in Imo State especially, our people are our major assets. And the real critical assets are not just those of us that are almost we have retired. It's the youth that we have to look up to. And then we have to commit to train them for entrepreneurial and vocational pursuits. It's no longer the time we used to train. When we were in the university, in our final year, we were taking newspaper cuttings and looking for employment in Shell, NMPC, the federal government ministry of works. Today's reality is that those jobs are not there. And you cannot just switch on or budget money for them. We need to create from the grassroots another way of doing these things. And that's why we must change our mindset. So how do we implement this philosophy? We need to capture the data of our existing infrastructure in Imo State, the industries, the shops, the hotels, the academic institutions. We need to know what we have, first of all, in a very scientific way, use the technologies of today to, and even use these same youths to gather information, then capture the youths themselves. Those, I mean, these days, 50-year people classify themselves as youths, but let's take 18 years to 40 years and categorize them into various groups based on gender, academic, vocational qualifications, their field experience, and their skill levels. Then we do a gap analysis. This our group can actually anchor that kind of thing. Emeka, you are in a position to organize that kind of activity. Then let's focus on shop floors. Well, I mean shop floors, not just the virtual shop floor. The virtual shop floors are very, very forward-looking and very, very interesting, the jobs they will create and the money they will bring in. But to get people to learn by doing, you need to have shop floors where they're going there and they feel the act of production, whether it's agro-allied, whether it's based on services and even healthcare. We need to have shop floors. And then my discussions in the next slides will show you how those shop floors can be created easily. Then we design special programs for the new economy. This is around Leo Staneke's area, coding to support AI, renewable technology for alternative power. Then again, we go back to the issue of standards. How do we get certifications? How do we put in the heads of our people that when somebody wants to come and tile your house, you ask him for a certificate? These days, people just say, I know a tiler you bring. But all those guys you bring from Togo, they're all carrying certificates, meaningful certificates. So we need to get back into that. And some of these things are things that government can do, but the government needs to do it with, in partnership with the private sector. And then funding, of course, always comes to play. We need to create the fourth investment bandwagon. Imo State has, and in fact, Igbo land, and to some extent, the whole of Nigeria, we operate the bandwagon effect. So when people hear that hotels are good business, people run. Everybody abroad, people here, you have some money, just the way our parents used to build 6 flats for rent, people now build hotels. And the issue of standards comes up again. People build these hotels because they believe that it just brings revenue and that ROI is high. School hostels, restaurants, lounges, nightclubs, that's in tourism. That's a lot of people have run to that zone. Again, another zone that people have done very well in, and which is helping create value in the system, the malls, the supermarkets, modern markets, spare parts markets, which government really organizes, and mechanic villages. On the other side of services, you have private schools, universities, vocational institutions, churches. Churches are also things people have really used to create value, farms and plantations. Now, something is missing in everything. We don't have an industrial zone in Nubuta. I've not seen any industrial zone in Amiibo or in Nkwere. Government has earmarked places for markets, for schools, but there is no deliberate attempt, apart from maybe the industrial area nowhere. I've not seen many industrial areas in these other places. We need to create that. The government has to now delineate some places and say, these are industrial zones. And what is the case for mini industrial and business parks? We can get many spin-offs. The model I have here that I'm going to show some pictures in the next slides are easy to assemble and scale. You can assemble them in the 4-plot area, and then you begin to scale it. Manageable, it's got manageable setup costs, and it can be done in groups. The asset management model, it's easy to do public, private, or communities. Things like cooperative societies can set up and run them, but it can employ large numbers of people. And then it's an opportunity for diaspora investors who want a place to safely plug in their money without having to come and start worrying about buying land and things like that. I say this is important because it brings in shop floors and business space with shared utilities at grassroots level. Small businesses with little capital can lease shop and equipment for short periods. You know, when we do all this training, we train welders, we train tailors, we train people, and then we send them away. Some people buy generators for welders they've trained, buy them a welding machine and buy them. But you know what? 2 months later, you see those welding machines up for sale because they don't have the other factors of capacity to help them use those things. And then the flexibility and diversity of services. Each part can host tailoring, fabrication, machining, electrical, cold storage, furniture, food processing, anything. So you have them in clusters like that. And then one of the greatest opportunities for the grassroots is that it creates facilities for post-training attachments and internships, something that is very lacking. Most people that we put through training, once they come out, they don't have anywhere to actually practice some of the training from welding to tailoring to computer education. So we need to get a robust supply chain, and the things I've discussed on the previous slides will help us actually to get these container industrial parks. I'll show you some models of how this will work. But let me remind you that it is our people that mined coal in Enugu in the early days. Those railway lines that are running in Nigeria today, is our people that physically did it. The roads, the houses, the furniture in the eastern region, we had people doing it. We need to get back to that mode where we mobilize our youth. Don't come and be following me around at a political talk. Let's go and create some things for them. Focus. So the oil and gas industrial park concept is something that I started when I was executive secretary in NCDMB. So I borrowed a few slides of what they're doing now. It was a good strategy, and it looked like it was too far-fetched when we started it, but I'll show you pictures. The Calabar Industrial Park is already progressing. Bayelsa is already progressing too. Imo is in the tender process. We had problems in Imo. Imo was slotted to be the second one, but because of C of O, the ease of doing business, we couldn't get our C of O until Emeka Ihade gave us. Now the governor is working with us to make sure that, the current governor is working with us to make sure that our project starts before the end of the year. So look at a typical industrial park. This is the Bayelsa one. It's got all this stuff, and it was conceived in 2014. The contracts were awarded in 2018, and look at where they are. This is very, very comprehensive, and you can see what it's the makeup of the individual units. In Imo State, we should have one of these, minimum one of these in the 3 senatorial zones, and then we should then create the clusters of what a senatorial zone is known to do. Okigwe has minerals, so we create clusters of people to service that kind of thing. Uguta is like oil and gas, fishes, tourism. We create a senatorial zone. But beyond that, we need to do, so these are some of the things that we could do with the oil and gas arrangements, right? The ANO project is a very critical project for Imo State. It's ongoing now with CEPLAT, and we need to go in there and see what we can do. CEPLAT has a very aggressive community relationship arrangement, but we need to focus and see how we get entrepreneurial groups, not just giving the community 50 slots. The oil company should help the community organize entrepreneurial groups so that even when they finish the construction, these entrepreneurial groups can use the new skills and capacity to do other things outside the oil and gas industry. Oil and gas industry is not something that really keeps jobs, but we must use it as a launch pad to create capacity. And that's the way I want us to focus on these things. These numbers are achievable. So what are the low-hanging fruits and quick wins? I would say we should go for these mini industrial clusters. These things are to be done out of containers. And if you look at this, it's like, this is the simple one. It's not like the NCDMB type. You put it in a place, get containers, stack them, and equip them for tailors, for welders, for furniture makers, for cold storage, things that are dominant in the area of your operations. This is a 3D of what a typical container industrial park, mini park would look like. So essentially, we would need to develop this a little bit more. 10, 15 minutes is not enough for me to really show the full extent of this, but this thing would help the youth focus. If the government can come out and make a policy and say, every local government chairman designate land of 2,000 to 5,000 square meters in your community, close where it's very conducive, and then we create the road and bring power to the place. Some community associations can sponsor the ownership of the containers, and then the small users can lease. It will have a management office and people will use that. That's something that I just thought I should share with you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.